Hello, everyone. My name is Amanda Wick, and I am the curator of the Charles Babbage Institute Archives. On behalf of the First Fridays Committee and the Archives and Special Collections Department, welcome to First Fridays. This season's theme is Matters of the Heart. Today's presentation will also be posted later on the University of Minnesota Library's YouTube channel. First Fridays is a monthly series of presentations made possible by a generous gift from Governor Elmer L. Anderson and Mrs. Eleanor Anderson in honor of former library director Dr. Edward B. Stanford. The presentations that you will hear today are based on materials in the University Library's Archives and Special Collections. A special thank you to our interpreters from Middle English who will be providing ASL interpretation for today's presentation. If time allows, we will have Q&A at the end. And if anyone from the Zoom audience has any questions for our speakers today, please submit them using the Q&A feature and not the chat so that we can keep track of your questions. In-person audience, please hold your questions until the end. I will be leading a tour after the presentations, and I will be waiting back towards that door. So please meet me there afterwards. Before we get started, we would like to pause for a land acknowledgement. The University of Minnesota Twin Cities is built within the traditional homelands of the Dakota people. It is important to acknowledge the peoples on whose land we live, learn, and work as we seek to improve and strengthen our relations with tribal nations. We also acknowledge that words are not enough. We must ensure that our institution provides support, resources, and programs that increase access to all aspects of higher education for American Indian students, staff, faculty, and community members. Our presentations today feature the Social Welfare History Archives and the Children's Literature Research Collection. First up is Linnea Anderson, archivist from the Social Welfare History Archives, presenting Danger in Familiarities, Relationship Advice from Social Workers. From safe dancing positions to safe sex, enjoy examples from the Social Welfare History Archives of how social service and public health organizations spread advice, medical information, and dire warnings through pamphlets, posters, and other teaching materials. Our second presentation is What I Did for Love, presented by Lisa von Drasek, Marinker Family Curatorial Chair of the Children's Literature Research Collections. As we enjoy the exhibit in the atrium, Journey to Joy, Race, Relevance, Representation in Children's Picture Books, we see what the authors and illustrators love about creating art and writing for children. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Linnea.
Thank you, Amanda. So today's talk is inspired by collections from organizations focused on youth work, health, marriage, recreation, and the family, as well as materials from schools, community centers, and recreation departments. And my first slide has just a few very wholesome examples to get us started. And these records show how organizations talked about dating, relationships, and marriage to teens and young adults. And they reveal the awkward encouragement and dire warnings that framed this work. Today, I will focus on the lighter side of this pretty dated relationship advice. There is much about the motivations, goals, and methods that we do not have time to unpack today. And there are also many serious topics about relationships covered in the records that are not part of this talk. And for those of you who are interested in a deeper dive, I invite you to visit the archives to use the collections. Just a note before we proceed, a primary function of these programs in this literature was to promote binary relationships that were perceived as traditional family and gender roles. So this is not an inclusive representative presentation. Danger in Familiarities. Danger in Familiarities. The title of this talk is taken from this wonderful poster from 1922, demonstrating the correct dancing position. The poster is part of a series for young women. There was a corresponding series for young men, and they provided the facts of life, moral education, sexual health information, and marriage advice. Messages included avoiding activities that produced urges or uncontrolled emotions. In this context, we can see that the poster promotes a correct dance position that avoids overstimulating your dance partner and producing uncontrollable urges. There will be no sex outside of marriage for the couple on this poster as long as they maintain the correct dancing position. So let's keep those hips the proper distance apart. The poster reveals concerns that are at the heart of how social work, youth work, and public health professionals viewed interpersonal relationships, dating, marriage, and family formation, and communicated about them to young people. Advice to youth often included strong social protection and moralistic elements, such as those in this poster that you can see in the enlarged text on the right. Conventions protect, meaning youth should accept societal rules and prohibitions, whether it is chaperones, dancing positions, abstinence, or who you are allowed to date and marry. The mention of protecting the race reveals the eugenic ideas behind such advice that a well-chosen marriage partner will produce better children, and the right kinds of marriages will lead society toward racial superiority. Young people must avoid temptations that produce dangerous urges and desires, is another piece of advice. Be careful about where you go, who you associate with, and what you think, read, do, eat, drink, listen to, and watch. Movie palaces and dance halls, forbidden. Picnics and chaperoned youth center dances, encouraged. Relationships should be built on emotional connection and compatibility, not just physical attraction. And words used throughout the literature to describe romantic feelings include fine, wholesome, pure, elevating, and ennobling. These are contrasted with words such as debased, degraded, and uncontrollable. There's a couple more examples here on this slide that reflect these concepts. So on the left, we learn that continually thinking about sex puts you on the road to trouble. And on the right, we see the idea that marriage is the sort of ultimate goal, and that one should abstain before one is married. And the records not only warn of dangers and pitfalls, they also encourage the right kind of interaction and activities. Literature and programs encouraged young people to meet, socialize, develop character, marry, and form the right kinds of families, but only within narrowly set boundaries of behavior, race, gender, ability, and fitness. And as is often the case, ideas about youth activities and relationships were also informed by nostalgia or myths about a past age when youth lived at home in rural communities and were chaperoned, and if they danced at all, danced the waltz, far apart, instead of the lindy or the jitterbug. And they also associated, as you can see in this slide here, marriage and traditional family roles with national strength. So the happiness of American homes is the strength of the nation. And then on the far side, on the right, safeguard our stronghold, the family. And in the center, a very romanticized picture of a dating couple being greeted by the improbably old mother of a teenager, actually. But it's a charming illustration, but it's this idea of chaperonage and family supervision. Teen time. Not surprisingly, the records often document programs aimed at teenagers. How to channel those teenage urges into safe dating situations and wholesome activities. The word wholesome appears frequently. Youth programs were often also motivated to foster citizenship and personal development. So youth leaders had to achieve the right amount of supervision and guidance while encouraging young people to organize their own groups and activities. And getting young people to meet, socialize, date but abstain from sex, and then marry and reproduce with the right person was enough to make any social worker, youth leader, or educator weep over their weekly report. Tomorrow's citizens, right? One solution was a teen leadership club and a teen social center or lounge. There are many examples of these in the collections from the files of community centers, schools, youth organizations, and rec programs. And I love the cartoons that come along with this book on how to run a teen center, where they are fixing it up themselves and working together as a group. Here's another great example. So a booklet of instructions on how to run a teen center for these very wholesome American youth. And then there's photos of activities too, such as the card game on the right. And teen centers were a location for socializing, learning, and recreation. And activities promoted teen leadership and responsibility under the watchful guidance of staff who were in charge of advising the youth, kicking out rowdy teens, keeping an eye out for drinking or making out, and generally trying to remain cheerful and calm while striving to make sure that events occurred with, as one youth worker put it in her report, a minimum of cake throwing. Makes you wonder. So youth centers often had club rooms where different clubs or scouting organizations could meet. Here we have an example of another card game at another youth center. This is life before the internet, right? Youth centers had codes of conduct. I love the photograph on the right of all of the young folks dressed up in their best clothes. I think that's a jukebox next to them, actually. And then a pretty successful looking party at a teen center on the left. It's a little hard to see the decor and possibly either a band or just that group of guys that always hangs out at the edges of a party up there on the stage. So youth center staff reports in the archives reflect mixed results, right? From well-attended dances, field trips, and thriving clubs to interpersonal, class, and racial tensions, no-show dance bands, and kissing in the dark during movie night. So a 1961 report from a teen lounge youth leader talks about balancing participation and enjoyment while watching out for trouble. His work included, and I'm quoting here, keeping a watchful eye for users of alcoholic beverages and those who use the area to plot their deeds of misconduct, not being permissive of any unbecoming conduct that was likely to develop in the room with its subdued lights if a movie were being watched in the evening. And he also noted that his work included the problems of boy-girl relationships. In this slide here, this is an excerpt of a brochure for teenagers from Five Towns Community House in Lawrence, Long Island. And it lists programs and includes rules that help teens control those urges and desires, such as alcoholic beverages are not allowed, gambling is not allowed. You know, rules often get added after something happens, so this one's pretty alarming. Improper dancing not allowed, but also not defined. No congregating in front of the building, and that there is a dress code for dances. So boys may not wear dungarees or t-shirts, and girls should wear skirts and dresses. Dancing. We can't talk about teen and young adult relationships without talking about dancing. Whether it was the school dance, the youth-centered dance party, or heaven forbid, a commercial dance club, social workers had a lot to say about the pleasures and perils of dancing. Well, mostly it was about the perils. Remember our correctly dancing couple? I love these. A report on dance halls in Chicago from 1917 includes detailed instructions for maintaining decorum, as shown in these illustrations of correct dance movements. It's a little hard to see the descriptions at the bottom, but they're literally showing like where the gentleman and the lady should put their feet and their arms and their faces. It's all mapped out for them. The author of this report is particularly offended by jazz dancing, so please clutch your pearls as I read an excerpt. Exaggerated movements. All exaggerated movements, especially of the upper part of the body, are in very bad taste in social dancing and are never found with true refinement and culture. Couples dancing with their faces together show such extreme bad taste that it should be unnecessary to even call attention to it here. It should be the duty of any person having charge of dance regulation to see that no exaggerated movements or positions be permitted that have a tendency to lower the standard of dancing. Just sounds like a great time. All right, this fantastic poster was issued by the Cleveland City Dance Inspector, which apparently was a real job. Yep. It lists 20 rules for public dance halls, including no jazz music and no shimmy dancing or jerky movements. Guests are admonished as follows: don't dance from the waist up, dance from the waist down. Dancers are not permitted to take either exceptionally long or short steps. I'm actually not sure how you dance if you can't take either one or the other of those. And then flirting, spooning, and rowdy conduct of any kind are absolutely prohibited, and so on.
Yeah.
The idea that dances should be carefully managed extended to teen dances at recreation and youth centers. So here we have an example of a dance management booklet issued to youth workers to explain how to run a dance. And then I love this photo. I don't know if she's a youth worker or a chaperone, maybe a teacher, explaining to the young couple, whom I'm sure would love to be dancing the jitterbug right about now, how to assume the correct dancing position. So there was advice on tickets and invitations, refreshments, music, decor, how to get groups to mix and form pairs, cleanup, and of course, chaperoning the dancers. Urge controlling rules included no alcohol, dress codes, specific types of dancing that were not allowed depending upon the time period and the hosting organization. Boys were not allowed to dance with boys, but there was no such prohibition for girls. And I heard that some of you noticed the previous slide, the photo of the girls forming pairs. Leaving the dance and coming back later was forbidden. This was to prevent drinking in the parking lot and other nefarious behaviors. And then attendance and invitation rules were designed to prevent rowdies or other people who were not welcome at the dance from busting up the dance or, alarmingly, showing up at the last minute just before the dance ended to pick up girls. So here's a flyer with a couple of, or a slide with a couple of flyers from the collection. The Harvest Hoedown flyer invites the ladies to wear low heels and full skirts, and the gents to relax in jeans and sports shirts. This is sort of a traditional, often a fall, it was a fall dance at schools and rec centers. I love the illustration in the one on the right, organizing and conducting dances for teenagers. That's from the St. Paul Recreation Department. And here's a couple of wonderful photos of kids having a great time at dances. They're possibly the one on the right. They may be square dancing. It's a little hard to tell from the position of the photo, but I just love these photographs. All right, and so here we have some of the miscellaneous publications about dating that I found in the archives. Dating, you know you love it. Organizations produced literature chock full of wholesome dating advice, including appropriate activities and behaviors that won't raise dangerous desires. So the couple on the left apparently are going on a picnic. It's possible that the author has no idea what you can get up to on a picnic. The middle one is tips on manners for boys who are going on dates, including if you call for your date in a car, do not sit outside and honk. But these resources also included gendered information on dating behavior and on understanding the opposite sex, as they put it. So, for example, on the right is a page from a document called the Bill of Rights for Girls, which I thought was a really interesting concept. However, it presents the argument that girls' dating experiences are framed partly by their future role as wives and mothers. And this wonderful yet awful pamphlet, Understanding the Other Sex, presents mostly stereotyped information on gender roles and traits and is very unlikely to result in a better understanding. The cartoons are very interesting. I'll read the captions. It's a little hard. Teenagers don't like their dates to look like characters in sultry movies. I think teenagers may actually love it if their dates look like characters in sultry movies. Boys resent it when girls give themselves beauty treatments at the table. His expression there is classic. And then dating is presented as fun, but also as potential mate selection and practice for marriage, which in turn was presented as the key to happiness, if well planned with a carefully chosen partner. And much of this advice is aimed at teens or college-aged young adults, with teens presenting a special concern. And while teen parents, teen pregnancy, and teen sex education are not the focus of today's talk, concerns about single teenage mothers, delinquent boys, or promiscuous girls informs many of the resources and programs for teens. Dating do's and don'ts for girls. So the pamphlet here was reissued a few times, offers advice that puts the onus on the girl for the boy's behavior during the date. And I'll just read a few excerpts from the screenshot. Don't go on blind dates, or if you do, bring a friend along with you. Fine. Think of something interesting to do. Item number 2 is really problematic. It says, collect your scatterbrains and put them to some useful purpose.
No.
So the supposedly limited intellectual power of the female is to be used for thinking up things to do on dates. Be quick to see the possibilities in a situation and prevent it before it occurs. So they say if you go see a sexy movie, you'd better eat with a crowd instead of go for a ride alone. I'm not sure why they're recommending a sexy movie, but that's... Remember, any girl with her wits about her has the upper hand in the situation. Don't lead your date on and wonder what is the matter with him. And finally, if you must put him in his place, as it says, do it kindly and take the blame yourself. These are very, as you can see, there's a reason why I picked this one as examples of gendered and problematic dating advice. And then number 6 is don't drink alcoholic beverages, not even a little, when on a date. And of course, the biggest don'ts are petting and sex. What's petting, you ask? Besides proof that not all words stand the test of time? This pamphlet lays it all out clearly. So the original, as far as I can tell on the right, issued around 1926. This one clearly is from the 1950s. I checked, the message didn't change between 1926 and the 1950s. So the pamphlet lays it all out clearly. I'm going to read a couple of brief excerpts. Here we go. In the general trend in recent years toward freedom, there has been manifested among young people the impulse to taste life in all its phases, and in no respect more frankly than in their social relations. So much so that there has developed what some believe to be the chief diversion among young people, the promiscuous play at love popularly known as petting. The reader is advised that petting leads to mismating by overstimulating merely physical urges, and that petting offers the immediate reaping of love thrills on a physical plane that are undeniably pleasurable and fascinating, but are they worth the price? All right, so any 15-year-old who gets a hold of this pamphlet was going to have no idea what was going on, but would probably also hope for some reaping of love thrills. A letter in the file with this item notes that it was criticized because it, and I'm quoting here, could give the impression some physical freedom between an engaged couple before marriage is desirable, and that it could easily be misinterpreted by high school age youth as sanction for more freedom than the authors intended. And it's interesting to me that the pamphlet urging young people to refrain from activities that would stimulate their urges is considered to be not strict enough in its messaging. All right, so here we have a fabulous photo of some canoodling teens and some advice that I'll read in a second. So what is a couple to do? What's a young couple to do? Teenagers are told to plan a lot of wholesome activities for their dates and friendships and keep their minds off petting and their urges under control. And the Find Yourself pamphlet, which they're sharing a milkshake on the front of that. That's so cute. Includes some strategies for how to manage your urges through better living, including badminton, stamp collecting, and picnics. Here's some more examples of wholesome activities. These actually, I mean, these legitimately look like a lot of fun, right? Picnics and campfires. These are all from these dating advice pamphlets. All right. Dating was also viewed as practice for marriage. Many publications have underlying assumptions that serious dating had the ultimate goal of marriage. The Dates and Dating pamphlet mentioned earlier includes a chapter titled Today's Dates and Tomorrow's Bride. Here's a quote, "The several years which lie between our first dates and marriage itself can be called dating years. You meet boys, Right. You meet boys, you go out with them, learn to know them, and to know more about yourself in the process. And it's interesting to me here that the woman is portrayed as developing self-knowledge in the context of her relationship with a man. Another quote is, "A good time is had by all. If the dating years are used with judgment and good sense, with a healthy spirit of camaraderie and recreation, the goal of happy marriage will be coming closer." As you can see in the images of our three couples here, who on the left, they're dating. He's read the etiquette pamphlet. And then they are engaged. It's a little hard to see, but the ring is being presented in the engagement photo there. And then, ta-da, they're married. The author also includes the usual warnings about making out, urges, and abstinence, and these are often aimed at young women and seem to be informed by an assumption that women are primarily responsible for keeping the couple virtuous. And the author says, "It isn't necessary, you know, to gain the approval of boys and the assurance of further dates by buying them with the coin of integrity and self-respect." And just in case the newly engaged couple thinks they are home free, there is this admonition. In marriage, lovemaking is surrounded by all the things that everyone wants: social approval, responsibility, ethical sanction, freedom from fear and anxiety, freedom from the necessity for guilty, uneasy secretiveness. These conditions cannot be reproduced outside of marriage. All right, I love this slide. These are actually transparencies from a late 1960s marriage and family life program for public schools. Right, and so throughout the records studied for this talk, the authors of this literature, they argue themselves into the same corner. They recognize that young people have urges, but promote sexual abstinence before marriage in adherence to strict societal norms. They also recognize that teenagers should not get married, as reflected in the illustration on the right. Their expressions are like, "We're married." The records include discussion of the problem of teen marriage and how to discourage it through laws and education. However, there's plentiful evidence in the records that young adults were actively encouraged to marry early, almost with a tone that says, well, let's face it, they can't hold out any longer. So organizations are trying to guide young people toward marriage, but make them abstain from sex, and the only way out is to encourage early marriage. And some even suggest that young couples should be married by 21. While others admit that men may need to wait longer, such as 25 or older, because they need education and job training in order to support their families. While women face the dilemma of being considered an old maid at 25. And it's not just early 20th century literature presenting this idea, it also appears in material from the mid-century. However, marriage was not presented as merely a release valve, and frustrated young couples were not just deposited alone at the altar without any further guidance. Dating literature often included courtship and marriage partner selection advice, and there are many examples in the collections of marriage education and marriage preparation literature for engaged and newly married couples. You can see some examples here. And again, these are also transparencies from the Family Life Education Program. So these types of materials advised engaged couples and newlyweds to get to know each other's values and goals and practice financial responsibility, prioritize character and emotional maturity in their life partner. And these ideas are reflected in both of these images here. However, they also promote traditional gender and family roles, as shown in these transparencies. I do think it's really interesting the amount of actual overlap in the Venn diagram when it comes to, wage earning, budgeting, cooking, cleaning. By the way, I would trade painting for cleaning any day. No. All right. I hope that you enjoyed this brief tour of dating, relationship, and marriage advice, and that you had as much fun learning about the publications, handouts, posters, program reports, and photos in the collections as I did researching them. You are welcome to make an appointment to use the collections in person, and some of these materials are also available online. And finally, please remember the important warnings that you learned today and to always assume the correct dancing position. All right. And our next talk is What I Did for Love, presented by Lisa von Drasik, Miranker Family Curatorial Chair of the Children's Literature Research Collection.
So never follow Linnea. Second.
Yeah, I know, I'm short. Okay, let's see here. Don't forget to get your newsletter. I work really hard on it. Notes, books. A lot of people. Hi.
Hi.
I'm Lisa Von Drasik. I am the Maranker Family Curatorial Chair of the Curlin Collection of Children's Literature here at the University of Minnesota Archives and Special Collections at the Elmer L. Anderson Library. That was also, I could get a sip of water in. There we go. Okay, let's get going. Yeah, okay, I said that. Oh, I know you already heard a land acknowledgement, but I'm going to do a little of it again because the land acknowledgement, we are on Dakota land. This land acknowledgement is one of the ways in which we work to educate the campus and community about this land and our relationships with it and each other. And that's especially important for what I'm going to talk about, which is the work of Marlena Miles. And if you haven't seen her Dakota land map with Dakota language names, it's on her website, Marlena Miles. So the other thing about this map is that we have a reproduction downstairs at the Wallen Center. And we have the works of 3 Indigenous Minnesota artists, Marlena Miles, Jonathan Thunder, and Annette Lee. And I'll talk more about them later. But the reason that's so important is this is the first time the Curlin has presented specifically American Indian illustrators and their publishers. And I'll be talking about why publishers are important in a minute. Am I loud enough? Raise your hand if you can hear me. Oh, excellent. Okay. Louder. Oh, I can do that. Okay, the journey to joy, rise, relevance, representation. The Children's Literature Research Collections delved into our cavern of materials to present to you what it looks like in children's literature. And children's literature is not only books, but it is also periodicals, magazines, anything in which children are being represented. And we took over the whole building. It's a journey to joy. This is Andrea Davis Pinkney. She's a writer. She's an editor. She has been a publisher and a curator of exhibits of children's picture book art. And the reason I'm showing you Andrea is she was our curatorial consultant on this. Over 3 years ago, Andrea and I were talking about, she came for a visit and she was looking at materials in the collection, and she imagined taking these materials from the cavern and showing them to people in context of representation. Let's talk about who gets represented. Let's talk about what children get to see themselves in books. And here we see Andrea's publications, over 30 books. And she's the one who named this exhibit. And the 3rd floor is Rise. We could have called it the stereotypical representation in the history of children's books. Guess who came up with that title? Yep, me. And she said, no, Lisa, yes, we're going to talk about history. We are going to show stereotypical representation. Yes. We are not going to whitewash history. But what we are also going to do is talk about the rise, the joy in children's picture books? What do we love about picture books, about reading aloud and sharing them with our families? And how do we know how to do this? We don't. We know how to research. We know how to write. I know how to pick out pictures. I kind of know what I want to say, but we have a designer. So you should know about Darren. That's Darren. Yay, that's Darren. And Darren works with the curators, worked with Andrea, worked with me to see how our vision could be presented so that people understand what we're saying. And if you think that was easy, it was not. And I remember after one meeting with Darren, I was like, I don't know if we even should be doing this. And someone noted to me that I was very difficult to work with. So on the third floor, if you go all the way to the end, you'll see a cage. We caged the stereotypical, ugly, historic images found in St. Nicholas Magazine, found in the work of Gustav Tengren, found in the work of Dr. Seuss. Do we need to put this in your faces all the time? No, but choose to pay attention and to face the history. These images were not by accident. They were propaganda. White people were beautiful, angelic, smart, funny, charming. Look at that guy, isn't he? And everyone else was not. So when we select these images to show, we have talk about it. So through the gallery, you'll see these signs, things to think about. How are American Indians depicted? How do we evaluate children's books that we loved when we were kids, but now we read and go, oh, that's problematic. I love that word. Thank you, Linnea. Problematic. And again, as we look at these, as we see the rise, we also see how people worked to bring the joy into picture books, into children's literature. You know the name W.E.B. Du Bois because you are familiar that he was a founder of the NAACP. Also had an international magazine called The Crisis that explicated, this is during the Harlem Renaissance, this is in the 1920s, the work of civil rights workers, the horror of lynchings. And in that magazine of The Crisis, it contained pictures of beautiful Black babies, celebration of accomplishments of young people. And this was one of the few places that Black children saw themselves in their culture and their stories and their poetry. But what he really wanted to do was take it out of that magazine and have a magazine like St. Nicholas Magazine, but showing the joy of Black culture. And so that was the Brownies book. The Brownies book is super rare. We just got a donation of one. It's ephemera. It's a magazine. You can't go on eBay and find one. But we have put these reproductions that, just show the joy. Thank you, Darren, for showing the joy of growing up Black. And I can't go through the entire exhibit. You're going to have to do that yourself. So I'm going to skip a few decades from the 20s to the 60s. And I want you to know there was an article written in 1965. Anyone who's a student of children's literature knows Nancy Larrick's work. And we know the all-white world of children's books. Can't get through library school without reading the all-white world of children's books, which 1965. And in case you think that's an exaggeration, in 1963, from a mainstream publisher, I'm not talking independent publishers, from a mainstream publisher, there was one book featuring a Black protagonist. There he is, Peter, the Snowy Day by Ezra Jack Keats. One, and it won the Caldecott. So you think that that would open some doors for others. 1964, How many? One. Whistle for Willie. Ezra Jack Keats. 1965. How many? That's right. Somebody else did that research. I didn't have to go through all the books. One. Biography of John Henry by Ezra Jack Keats. 3 years, 3 books by a white guy from Brooklyn. And so that's what we see on the 3rd floor. We move into how to select and evaluate books, to think about awards and who gets them and who doesn't. And then we have a bookcase filled with diverse books for you to share with your families and your loved ones, to select, to evaluate, to buy. Books stay in print when you buy them. The 2nd floor is relevance. When I first got here over 10 years ago, someone said the governor, Jesse Ventura, walked through the archives and special collections and glanced and saw that we had an archive of children's books. And he said, what do we need that for? What do we need that for? Yeah, that's a very good question. Each floor answers a question. The 3rd floor answers the question, why do children need to see themselves reflected in their literature? The 2nd floor tells us the story of people who come to the University of Minnesota and do research. And we have Andrea Davis Pinkney talking about why she donates her materials to the collection. And then we see the work of early career illustrators and writers and the work they do, the research they do, what they looked at. Celia Perez, I love her book, The First Rule of Punk, said when she visited the Curling collection, she was surprised to read the notebooks of Kate DiCamillo. And she said that Kate's process was a conversation with herself, with the protagonist, and with the story. Kate's notes reminded me that the story is a living thing too, and the writer's relationship with the story requires respect, openness, and a willingness to follow and listen. Yoo Hee-yoon is an artist. She's a professor of illustration at the Rhode Island School of Design. When she visited the Curling collection, she was able to see the historic illustrations of Petunia, which is a limited palette. And she could see how the artist was able to create more colors through his printing process. And the 1st floor in the Wallen Center, we talk about that representation. We really see the joy. And we are celebrating the winners of the Ezra Jack Keats Award. And the 2nd floor are the Ezra Jack Keats Fellows. And the 1st floor are the Ezra Jack Keats Award winners. Do you see a theme going on here? The Ezra Jack Keats Foundation gives money to the University of Minnesota Curling Collection so that we can host researchers. And they also give money to encourage new to the profession artists and writers. And just as Ezra Jack Keats got the Caldecott for one of his first books, think of, well, he was working for about 10 years as an illustrator, but it was one of his first children's books, and it was the first one that he wrote himself. The joy that he felt having that experience of knowing that other people thought his work was worthy, and it gave him the courage to continue in a very hard profession. And that's what the Ezra Jack Keats Foundation does, is they encourage the work of early artists and writers. And so we are celebrating their work because their excellence in art and writing can be on exhibit in the galleries. And you can see manuscripts, you can see original art, you can see color studies. Thank you, Amu, that book. You can see the original dummy had a different name, but you see 5 different color studies. This is Bird by Zetta Elliott, Shonda Strickland. Julian is a mermaid. Representation. Here is a child who wants to be in the mermaid parade in Coney Island, and how he dresses up, and how the joy of the experience. And that's the Ezra Jack Keats Award. Are we reflecting the experiences of children? Are they developmentally appropriate? Is the art excellent? Tia Isa wants a car, illustrated by Claudia Munoz, written by Meg Medina. And when Meg Medina received her Newbery Award, she talked about how important it was when she got that Ezra Jack Keats Award, that these librarians, illustrators, authors who make up the committee wanted to see more from her. And back to the snowy day. Ezra Jack Keats, white guy from Brooklyn, wanted to reflect his community in his picture books. And he said, well, people asked him, did you do this on purpose for diversity, for this, for that? And he said, no, I wanted to write a book for the kids who should have been there already in these books. And our representation continues down in the Wallen Center. This is an illustration by Marlena Miles, a book of poetry, a collection of poetry she illustrated. Thank you. Oh, there it is. And you can see all kinds of people. And then Jonathan Thunder, the Luth artist, fine artist also, but children's book illustrator. We're hoping to see more from him. This is Bow Wow Powwow, written by Brenda Child. And then again, books. There are books to share, to read, to evaluate. Is this a book you want in your home? Go to Birch Bark Books, go to the Red Balloon, go to the Wild Rumpus, go to Moon Palace, go to your independent bookstores, support them. And evaluate these books. And on each floor that we have these bookcases, we have points to think about. What to think about when we're evaluating books. Accuracy, beauty, storytelling. And with that, I am going to read aloud a book to you.
Sweet.
Because I want you to think about when you see these pages, when you hear the music of the language, is this a book you would share with someone else? Is this a book you would buy? And I specifically picked this book because it's a 2024 book. Who knows the book? Let's go. How et quoi? How et quoi is a Cree phrase. It's an idiom that means already, let's go now, let's do it. How et quoi by Julie Flett. This is how you pronounce it. How et quoi? Okay then. And I said that to somebody, it means okay then. And somebody else went, well, that's very Minnesotan. Let's go. How et quoi? From my window every day, kakush, 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 closer and then farther. Ha, et quoi? Let's go. At the park, I imagine myself riding a skateboard on the path that winds like a river. One morning, my mom brings home a bag from Grandma's house, her skateboard from when she was my age. Ha, et quoi? Let's go. Down the sidewalk, kakush, kakush, kakush. At the playground, push, push. In the empty basketball court, ow. At Auntie's place, swoosh. And in the schoolyard, after school, oh. But today it's raining. I wait for 2 days for the rain to stop. Finally, it's time. We're going to the skate park. But when we arrive, it's like a waterfall of skateboarders crashing down. I'm not sure. Maybe I'll just watch. I'll find a quiet spot. Soon, I'm not alone. We sit together, watching the patterns and pace, and feet and hands and faces. We look at each other. Then together, how equa, let's go. The more I watch and the more I skate, the more I become part of something and myself. Sometimes we skate down the street like a little river together. Sometimes we load into our car and drive to all the skateboard parks we can find in one day. And sometimes there's a new kid at the skateboard park, and we sit together for a while, and when she is ready, how, Ikwa, let's go. Now every day, kakush, 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 closer, closer, home.
You can read to me anytime.
Thank you. There are too many people to thank, but none of this would be possible without the hard work and support of our director, the First Friday Committee, the CLRC staff, the Curlin Friends, the interns, the volunteers, the donors, my fellow curators, the faculty, the researchers, and the Marankers, who endowed the Maranker Family Curatorial Chair. The theme of this year's First Friday series is love. This is what I do for love. This. Thank you. We do have time for questions. You're going to take the questions? Yeah, please.
So I've got a mic and I will bring to the folks. We're down over here.
Mine isn't a question. It's an observation, a comment about the first presentation. When talking about the dances and what's okay and what's not okay, I was seeing in my mind the scene, the dance at the gym from West Side Story.
Absolutely.
And John Aston played Glad Hand, the director of the dance place for where it was appropriate. And girls can only dance with girls, but boys can't dance with boys. Can't dance, and Puerto Ricans can't dance with white Americans or European Americans. All of those things that were not said there were said so well at dance at the gym.
Yeah, that was one of the things I was thinking about as well. I appreciate that comment. Thank you.
One over here.
That one, here we go.
Hi, I'd like to ask Lisa, who did the research and how much time it took to prepare your exhibition?
Years. Years. I think there's not an answer to that question because we swim in these waters. So when we start, you know, I figure what, I got 3-4 years left in position. I have more projects than I could possibly do. So I just I turn my head, and we can blame Andre Pinkney and Darren for this actually happening, because it's just too much. It's all just too much. That's the honest answer. It's just all too much. Anytime you come into this building and you see this is on top of our regular jobs, our job, you know, classes and collection development and talking to people. And that's the best part of collaborating with other people, is when you're just saying, I can't do this. This is too much. Somebody else says, yes, but did you see this book, Layla's Happiness? You know, when Andrea plucked that out of the piles, I was starting my speech that goes, I can't do this. I can't do this. I just can't do this. You know, talking to people. I probably talked to 60 creators to get a half a dozen original pieces of art and manuscripts. So just for the gallery, just for that little money. I mean, you know, everything we do. And we're like ballet dancers. You're not supposed to see that. So thanks for asking, because I just like vomited, you know, it's hard. And thank God there are people like the Curlin Friends who are saying this is important. This is important information to get out there. It's important for people to know that the Curlin contains the good, the bad, the ugly, and the beautiful. How's that? Do I get an A for my answer? Yeah.
We have a question over here.
I'd like to ask both our curators. I think your presentations today are, as usual, splendid. The exhibits are always fine. And has the new president of the university and have the Board of Regents and issued special invitations to come for guided tours to see this jewel in the crown of our land grant organization?
Feel free to write them a note. You know, the University of Minnesota is huge. It's a city. It could be, you know, it's a city. So if the president of the university could be doing something 3 times a day, I would love them to come see our work here. So anybody, feel free, you know, a petition. Yeah. That's a good question. A+. It's hard to talk in front of people.
Hi, I guess it's more of a comment / question to our first speaker. Can you tell me again, what was the intent with the first, with your, you know, what you presented? Because I felt as though, you know, we were laughing the whole time, which is natural, but I'm a home economist. I, you know, studied the family, and the family's developed over time. And of course, it keeps changing. And with everyone, you know, just laughing, did we need for all of these things, you know, that we saw in the brochures to happen in order to have the families that we do today? The feelings that it left me with were, I don't know, I can't describe it. Just, you know, like, yeah, some of it's humorous, but I just felt like maybe, you know, why are we all just laughing?
I love that comment. And I'll have to answer briefly because I see we're almost at time. First off, yes, completely agree with you. I deliberately took a light, as I said at the beginning, a light approach to this because a lot of my First Friday talks get pretty serious about the topic. And if you look at the Social Welfare History Archives and the history of human services in the US, this is a very powerful impact on marginalized communities, often for good, often not for good. But frankly, because of the timing of my talk right at the beginning of November 2024, I decided to take a little more of a light look at the material. But you're absolutely right. There is a continuum. There's a connection between these ideas about family, gender, sexuality, and the nation that it's a through line all the way through the history of the US. And this sort of spotlight that's on teenagers and young people of, like the future of the nation is on your shoulders, and how are we going to teach you to manage that is something that's really a core theme in some of the collections in the archives. So yeah, as I noted at the beginning, there are very serious topics in the archives that are documented more frequently than these lighter topics are. And I always have to approach the history of social work recognizing the hard work of the social workers and youth workers themselves, who were writing these literatures as best they could. And in retrospect, we look back at that now and go, oh, that's so wholesome and cute. But it was very serious business at the time, and it has a continuing impact, I think, into the present. So I love your comment. That's why I do these talks. I just love to learn from the audience. So thank you for that.
That's all we have time for today. But if there are questions and follow-ups for any of our speakers, of course, you are welcome to come and speak to us after the presentations. I am leading a tour of the caverns shortly. I will be sticking around in the back corner of the room for a few minutes. So please, if you'd like to come along, take a moment and then come meet me back there. Thank you.